Senna didn't know the letter had reached the wrong hands. She didn't know that the words she'd scrawled in a fit of sleepless honesty had slipped past her village courier, through the capital gates, and landed directly on the desk of the Alpha King himself. And she definitely didn't know that in 3 hours he would be standing at her door, holding her deepest secrets like a weapon. All she knew was that her hand was cramping, the candle had burned down to a nub, and if she didn't finish copying this merchant's inventory ledger by sunrise, she wouldn't eat this week. Senna's cottage sat at the edge of Thornwick, a forgotten village that most maps didn't bother to name. One room, a leaking roof, and a writing desk she'd built from salvaged wood. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The only place in the world where she could be alone with the gift she'd spent 23 years hiding. She flexed her ink-stained fingers and glanced at the stack of documents waiting to be copied. Wills, love letters, trade agreements. People paid her to write their words because her penmanship was flawless and her discretion was absolute. They didn't know about the other thing, the curse, the blessing. Whatever it was that made her ink reveal truths she had no business knowing. It had started when she was 9, writing a letter for a neighbor who couldn't read. Halfway through, the words had shifted beneath her quill, rearranging themselves into a confession the woman had never spoken aloud. Her husband wasn't dead. She'd buried him alive in the root cellar. Senna had learned to control it since then. Mostly. The trick was detachment. Copy the words without feeling them. Never write about anyone she cared about. Never, ever write when her emotions were running hot. Last night, she'd broken every rule. She'd heard the rumors in the market. The Alpha King was dying. Some said curse, some said poison, and some said the gods themselves had turned against him. Senna had returned home, unable to sleep, her mind churning with thoughts of the young king who'd taken the throne at 19 after his parents' mysterious deaths. She'd written to quiet her thoughts, just for herself, just to process. The ink had done what it always did when her heart was in the words. She'd sealed the letter, intending to burn it at dawn. But dawn came with urgent knocking, a frantic courier needing her stack of outgoing documents, and the letter had vanished with the rest. That was 2 days ago. Now it was 3 a.m., and someone was pounding on her door. Heavy. Deliberate. The knock of someone who didn't need to ask permission. Senna's blood turned to ice. She rose slowly, her bare feet silent on the cold floor, and opened the door. The Alpha King stood in her doorway, her letter in his hand. He was taller than the stories claimed. Broader, too. Moonlight carved shadows across a face that looked like it had been sculpted by someone who understood both beauty and war. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, pale amber like wolf's fire, burned into hers with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. "Senna Vire," he said. Not a question. She couldn't speak. Couldn't move. The most powerful man in the kingdom was standing on her rotting doorstep at 3 a.m., and she was wearing a threadbare nightgown with ink stains on the sleeves. "May I come in?" His voice was low, controlled, but something beneath it crackled like a wire pulled too tight. She stepped back automatically, and he crossed the threshold, filling her tiny cottage with his presence. 2 guards remained outside, shadows with swords. He held up the letter, her handwriting, her seal. "How did you know?" he asked. Senna's throat closed. "Know what, Your Majesty?" "Don't." The word was soft, but final. He unfolded the letter and read aloud. "The sickness is not sickness. The medicine is the blade. Someone close wears loyalty like a mask while feeding death drop by drop. The Wolf King dies not by enemy hands, but by the one who pours his wine." Each word hit her like a physical blow. She remembered writing them, the quill moving almost on its own, the ink gleaming wet and strange as truths she couldn't possibly know spilled onto the page. "I've had this letter for 2 days," the king continued. "I've had my physicians examine me in secret. They found traces of moonshade in my blood, a slow poison, undetectable unless you know to look. He stepped closer, and she smelled pine and wood smoke, and something darker underneath. The poison has been administered for at least 3 months. Someone in my inner circle. Someone I trust. His gaze pinned her in place, wolf gold and unblinking. No one knows this except me, my physician, and now you. So I'll ask again. How did you know? The lie was right there. Ready. A lucky guess. A rumor overheard. But Senna had seen men like the village magistrate and the merchant lord who'd come sniffing around her gift. Once they knew what she could do, they never let her go. They used her until she was wrung dry, and then they buried her secrets with her. I can't tell you, she whispered. Can't or won't. Does it matter? Something shifted in his expression. The predator pulled back, and she glimpsed exhaustion underneath, hollowed cheeks and shadows under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. I'm not here to hurt you, he said quietly. I'm here because I'm running out of time, and your letter is the first true thing anyone has given me in 3 years. Senna's heart stuttered. What do you mean, true? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm surrounded by liars, courtiers who smile while they plot, advisors who swear loyalty while they scheme. I've suspected the poison for months, but I couldn't prove it. Couldn't trust anyone enough to investigate. He held up the letter. Then this arrived. Written by a village scribe with no connection to the court, no reason to lie, and no possible way of knowing what she wrote. His gaze sharpened. Unless she has a gift. The word hung between them like a guillotine blade. Senna said nothing. The king smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My name is Kaelin, and I need your help. I don't help kings, Senna said, the words coming out steadier than she felt. I copy documents. I write letters for people who can't hold a quill. That's all. Kaelin didn't blink. You wrote that my parents' deaths weren't accidents. The air left her lungs. She'd forgotten that part. The ink had kept flowing that night, pouring out secrets like blood from a wound. The old king and queen, dead within a week of each other. Officially, a fever. Unofficially, whispers of something darker. I didn't mean to write that, she breathed. But you did. And you were right. A muscle feathered in Kaelin's cheek. I was 19 when they died. Too young, too grief-stricken, too trusting. I believed the physicians who said it was natural. I believed my father's closest advisor when he swore to guide me. His voice hardened. I've spent 3 years believing lies while someone picked my family off one by one, and now they're coming for me. Senna pressed her back against the wall. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to find them. He took a step closer. Your gift, whatever it is, it sees through deception. You wrote truths about me that no spy could have uncovered. No torture could have extracted. If you can do that from a village 50 miles away, imagine what you could do inside the palace. Inside the... Senna shook her head. You want me to come with you? To the capital? 2 weeks. Kaelin's voice was raw. The physician says that's how long I have before the moonshade accumulates past the point of recovery. After that, nothing can save me. I need to find the traitor before then. 2 weeks. She looked at him again, really looked, and saw what the shadows had hidden. The slight tremor in his hands, the way he held himself too rigidly, compensating for weakness, the pallor beneath his sun-darkened skin. He was dying. Slowly, invisibly, and completely alone. What makes you think I can help? She asked quietly. Your letter. Simple. Certain. You saw what no one else could see. You wrote truths you had no way of knowing. I don't understand how your gift works. But I know it's real. And I know you're the only chance I have. Senna thought about the village magistrate who'd found out about her gift when she was 16. How he'd locked her in a cellar for 3 days, demanding she write about his enemies until her hands bled. She'd escaped, but the lesson remained. Powerful men didn't ask, they took. But Kalen wasn't taking. He was standing in her cottage at 3 a.m., a king asking a scribe for help. And if I say no? Then I leave. You never see me again. I die in 2 weeks, and whoever killed my parents takes the throne. He said it without drama, just facts. But I don't think you'll say no. Why not? Because you wrote that letter? His eyes held hers, firelight dancing in their depths. You didn't have to. You could have kept your gift buried, stayed safe, let the world burn. But you wrote it anyway, because some part of you wanted to help, even if it meant exposing yourself. Senna's chest tightened. He was right, and she hated him for seeing it. I have conditions, she said. Name them. I owe money to a man named Herrick. 60 gold pieces. He's been threatening to sell my cottage. Consider it paid. I want a blood oath that you'll let me leave when this is done. No chains, no cages, no keeping me as your personal truth teller. Kalen pulled a blade from his belt. Without hesitation, he drew it across his palm. Blood welled up, dark in the candlelight. I swear on my blood and my crown, you help me find the traitor, and you walk free. No chains, no cages, ever. He extended his hand. Senna hesitated. Then she took the knife and cut her own palm. When their hands clasped, she expected pain. What she got was lightning. Something surged between them, hot and electric, rushing through her veins like wildfire. Her vision blurred, and for one dizzying heartbeat she felt him, his fear, his loneliness, his desperate, ferocious hope. The bond snapped into place like a lock finding its key. When they broke apart, both gasping, Kalen's eyes were wide. What? He breathed. Was that? Senna had no answer. But she knew, with terrifying certainty, that everything had just changed. The capital rose from the mist like a creature waking from slumber. Senna had never left Thornwick. Her world had been cottage walls and village roads, and the same 12 faces at market day. Now she sat in a carriage lined with velvet, watching towers pierce the clouds and walls stretch endlessly in both directions. Irindral, the wolf's seat, home of kings for 600 years. Breathe, Kalen said from the seat across from her. It doesn't bite. Easy for you to say. You grew up here. Which is exactly why I know. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. The city is just stone and people. It's the palace you should worry about. He meant it as a joke, but Senna's stomach clenched anyway. They entered through a private gate, away from crowds and prying eyes. Kalen had explained on the journey. No one could know why she was really here. As far as the court was concerned, she was a distant cousin visiting from the provinces. A nobody. Invisible. The palace was nothing like she'd imagined. She'd expected cold grandeur. Instead, she found warmth. Tapestries in deep reds and golds softened the stone walls. Fireplaces crackled in every corridor. Servants moved with quiet efficiency, nodding respectfully as they passed. A woman named Brazil showed her to her chambers. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the kind of face that had seen everything and judged most of it harshly. His Majesty says you're to have whatever you need, Brazil said, pushing open a heavy oak door. Ring the bell for food, the blue cord for a bath, the red cord for me. Senna stepped inside and stopped breathing. The room was larger than her entire cottage. A bed piled with furs dominated one wall. Windows overlooked a garden where winter roses bloomed despite the frost. A writing desk sat near the fireplace, already stocked with parchment, ink, and quills of every size. He had this prepared, Senna whispered. His Majesty is thorough. Brazil's expression remained unreadable. He also said to tell you, rest tonight. The work begins tomorrow. After she left, Senna sank onto the bed, her mind spinning. 12 hours ago, she'd been copying merchant ledgers by candlelight. Now she was in the palace, bound to a dying king by blood oath and something else. Something that still hummed beneath her skin when she thought about the moment their hands had touched. The bond. She didn't understand it. Didn't know if it was her gift, his bloodline, or something else entirely. But she felt it like a second heartbeat. Faint but constant, pulsing with awareness of him somewhere in this vast palace. She should be terrified. She should be planning her escape. Instead, she found herself thinking about his eyes, the exhaustion in them, the loneliness. A king surrounded by liars, slowly dying, trusting a stranger with his life. Senna looked at the writing desk, the blank parchment waiting like a dare. Tomorrow, she would hunt a killer. Tonight, she would try to remember how to sleep. Morning came with gray light and a knock at her door. Kaylin stood in the corridor, dressed simply in dark wool and leather, looking less like a king and more like a man carrying the weight of mountains. The shadows under his eyes had deepened overnight. "Did you sleep?" Senna asked. "Did you?" Neither of them answered. He led her through winding corridors to a room she suspected few people ever saw. Small, windowless, lined with shelves holding dozens of objects, a wine goblet, a silk handkerchief, a signet ring, letters tied with ribbon, a dagger with a jeweled hilt. "Evidence," Kaylin said quietly. "Items I've collected over the past 3 years. Things touched by the people closest to me. Things connected to my parents' deaths, to my poisoning, to decisions that went wrong in ways I couldn't explain." Senna approached the shelves slowly. Even from a distance, she could feel them calling to her, that familiar pull toward hidden truths waiting to be written. "How does your gift work exactly?" Kaylin asked. "The letter you wrote about me. You'd never seen me, never touched anything of mine." "It's not touch. It's..." She struggled to explain what she'd never spoken aloud. "When I write about someone or something with real emotion, with genuine need to understand, the ink shows me truths. Hidden things. Secrets the person would never speak. The stronger the emotion, the more powerful the revelation." She paused, a shadow crossing her face. "Once, when I was 16 and terrified, the words actually glowed. I've never let myself feel that deeply since." "And you can control it?" "Sometimes. Strong emotions make it harder. And afterward..." She hesitated. "It drains me. The deeper the truth, the higher the cost." Kaylin nodded slowly. "We'll go carefully, one item at a time, and you stop when you need to." She selected the wine goblet first. Simple silver, unremarkable except for the crest etched into its base, the king's personal cup. Senna sat at the small desk, took up a quill, and let herself feel. Curiosity, need, the desperate desire to understand who had been pouring poison into this cup. The ink began to flow. Hands steady, practiced, a smile that never reaches the eyes. He waits until the king is distracted, conversation flowing, laughter masking the moment. The vial is small, easily palmed. 3 drops, never more. Patience is everything. The Wolf King dies slowly, and no one suspects the one who guards his door. Senna gasped, the quill clattering from her fingers. Her head pounded, vision swimming. "Guards his door," she breathed. "Someone who's always there, someone trusted to be close." Kaylin had gone pale. "My personal guard. There are 4 of them. The one who pours your wine at dinners. Marin." The name came out strangled. "He's served me since I took the throne, saved my life twice in border skirmishes." Senna reached for the next object, a silver cloak pin shaped like a wolf's head. Her fingers trembled as she wrote. "Gold changes hands in shadow." A promise whispered, "When the king falls, You'll command the Eastern Regiment. Marin nods, but his eyes are empty. He doesn't do this for power. He does it because they have his sister. Because she'll die if he fails. The headache spiked, nausea rolling through her. Senna dropped the quill, pressing her palm to her forehead. He's being coerced, she managed. They have someone he loves. A sister. Kaelin caught her elbow as she swayed, his grip warm and steady. That's enough for now. There's more, I can see edges of it. A larger conspiracy. Someone orchestrating all of this. And you'll find them. But not by killing yourself in the process. He guided her to a chair, his hands gentle. Rest. You don't have time for me to rest. 2 weeks, you said. 12 days now. His expression hardened. But you're no good to me collapsed. We pace this properly, or we don't do it at all. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you're enjoying the story. Senna looked up at him. This king who kept catching her when she stumbled, who spoke of his own death with steady pragmatism but wouldn't let her push too hard. Why do you care? She asked. About my well-being. You need answers. Most men would push until they got them. Something flickered in his gaze, warm and unguarded. I'm not most men. I'm beginning to realize that. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Then he straightened, the king's mask sliding back into place. Rest for an hour. I'll have food sent. Then we continue. He left, and Senna sat in the quiet room surrounded by objects heavy with secrets, her palms still tingling where he'd touched her, her mind spinning with questions that had nothing to do with the conspiracy. Who are you, Kaelin? She thought. And what is this thing growing between us? The days fell into rhythm. Mornings, Senna worked with the objects. Each one revealed fragments. A handkerchief that whispered of secret meetings, a letter whose true message lurked beneath the ink, a ring that pulsed with betrayal so thick she could taste it. Kaelin was always there, catching her when the visions hit too hard, bringing water, giving her time to recover. Afternoons, she explored the palace under the guise of her cousin identity. The library became her refuge, 3 stories of books and scrolls and the kind of silence that felt like safety. She learned the layout of the halls, noted which servants watched too closely, which courtiers' smiles never reached their eyes, and evenings, increasingly, she spent with Kaelin. It started as strategy sessions, reviewing what she'd uncovered, planning the next day's work. But somewhere along the way, the meetings stretched longer. The conversation drifted from conspiracy to other things. You never wanted to be king, Senna said on the 5th night. They sat in his private study, a fire crackling low, wine untouched between them. No. Kaelin stared into the flames. I was supposed to have decades to prepare. My father was healthy, strong. I thought I'd be a scholar, maybe. Travel the kingdom. Fall in love with someone entirely inappropriate. A bitter smile. Instead, I buried my parents at 19 and spent every day since trying not to drown. You're not drowning, you're fighting. I'm dying. You're fighting that too. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the walls crack slightly. You're the first person in 3 years who doesn't want something from me. I want your gold, she reminded him. The debt, remember? That's different. That's a transaction. Everyone else wants power, influence, my ear, my bed, my throne. He shook his head. You just want to go home. The words shouldn't have stung, but they did. Maybe I'm not in such a rush anymore, Senna said quietly. Kaelin went still. On the 7th night, she found him on the eastern balcony, staring out at a city glittering with lamplight. His hands gripped the stone railing, knuckles white. I arrested Marin today, he said without turning. He confessed. They have his sister in a village called Crestwood, held by mercenaries. He's been poisoning me for 8 months, and he wept when I confronted him. Begged me to save her. Will you? I've already sent men. She'll be free by morning. He finally looked at her, and the anguish on his face stole her breath. But the one who gave the orders, the one behind all of it, Marin doesn't know who they are. He received instructions through dead drops, coded messages. Whoever's doing this is smart enough to stay invisible. Senna moved to stand beside him. We'll find them. I'm getting closer. The objects are painting a picture. We have 7 days left. Then we'll find them in 7 days. He laughed, but it was ragged. You say that like it's simple. Nothing about this is simple. She hesitated, then reached out, covering his hand with hers. But you're not alone anymore. That counts for something. Kalen turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. The connection between them flared, that electric awareness singing through every nerve. I've been fighting myself for days, he said slowly, trying to remember you're leaving when this is done. Is it working? No. Her pulse quickened. Kalen. I know. His thumb traced circles on her palm, and she felt it everywhere. You're leaving when this is done. You have a life to return to. I have no right to ask you for anything beyond what we agreed. What if I want to give more? His breath caught. Do you? She should say no. Should protect herself the way she'd learned to do, pull back before she got hurt. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him. Kalen made a sound like something breaking. His hands came up to cup her face, and he kissed her back with a desperation that made her knees weak, like she was air and he'd been drowning for years. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead pressed to hers. This is a terrible idea, he whispered. Probably. You should run. Probably. Are you going to? Senna pulled back to look at him. The firelight turned his gaze molten wolf gold and vulnerable. He looked hopeful and terrified, like a man who'd forgotten how to want things for himself. Ask me again, she said, after we've saved your life. Ask me when you're not dying, when the conspiracy is broken, when we've actually won. And I'll think about it. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. Kalen smiled, genuine and devastating. I can work with not a no. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a plea. Then he walked her back to her chambers, his hand warm in hers, neither of them speaking, neither of them needing to. At her door, he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. 7 more days, he said. I intend to earn that yes. Then he left, and Senna leaned against the door, heart racing, wondering when saving a king had become something so much more dangerous. On the 9th day, Senna touched a letter that changed everything. It was unremarkable at first glance. A trade agreement, routine correspondence between the palace and a merchant guild. But something about the seal nagged at her, a familiarity she couldn't place. She wrote. The ink twisted, darkened, and the words that emerged made her blood freeze. The scribe knows too much. She unravels threads faster than anticipated. The Wolf King grows stronger with her at his side. The bond feeds him, slows the poison. She must be eliminated before the full moon. Make it clean. Make it look like the gift consumed her. Senna's hand shook so violently the quill clattered to the floor. They knew. Whoever was behind this, they knew about her, about the bond, about everything. And they were coming. Senna. Kalen's voice came from the doorway. He took one look at her face and crossed the room in 3 strides. What did you see? She couldn't speak, could only point at the parchment where her handwriting gleamed wet and damning. Kalen read it. His expression didn't change, but she felt the fury through the bond, volcanic and barely contained. The full moon is in 4 days, he said quietly. They're going to kill me. No. The word was absolute. I won't allow it. You might not have a choice. Senna forced herself to think past the fear. The seal on that letter. I've seen it before. Somewhere in the palace. If I can remember where. You're not investigating anything. You're leaving tonight. Kaelin. This isn't negotiable. He gripped her shoulders, his eyes blazing like molten gold. I brought you here. I put you in danger. I won't watch you die for my war. It's my war now, too. She met his gaze steadily. The bond, remember? Whatever this is between us, it's not one-sided. I feel you, Kaelin. Your fear, your determination, your... She stopped, but the word hung unspoken. Love. His hands tightened on her shoulders. Senna, send me away and you lose your only weapon. I'm the one who can find the traitor. Without me, you die in 4 days, and whoever did this wins. I'd rather die than watch them hurt you. Well, I'd rather neither of us dies. She covered his hands with hers. So let's find another option. The war in his eyes was painful to watch. King versus man, duty versus heart. If we do this, he said finally, you don't leave my sight. Not for a moment. You sleep in my chambers, you eat only what I eat, you go nowhere without me or Brizel. Agreed. And at the first sign of real danger, you run. You don't argue, you don't hesitate, and you don't try to save me. You run. Senna hesitated. Promise me. His voice cracked. I need to know you'll survive this even if I don't. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble, the tension in his jaw, the desperation humming beneath his skin. I promise, she lied, because there was no version of this where she let him die alone. The assassin came that night. Senna woke to Kaelin's hand over her mouth, his body pressed against hers in the darkness, his lips at her ear. Don't move. Don't breathe. She heard it then. Soft footsteps in the corridor, the whisper of steel being drawn. Kaelin moved like smoke, rolling silently from the bed, his own blade appearing from beneath the pillow. The door burst inward, and shadows poured through. 3 of them. Masked, armed, moving with trained precision. Kaelin met the first with brutal efficiency, his sword singing through the air. The second circled toward Senna, and she scrambled backward, her hand closing around the candlestick on the nightstand. The assassin lunged. Senna swung. The impact jarred her arm to the shoulder, but the man crumpled. She didn't have time to process what she'd done before Kaelin was there, finishing the third attacker with a strike that painted the walls red. Silence fell, broken only by their ragged breathing. Are you hurt? Kaelin's hands ran over her, checking for wounds. No. You? I'll live. He looked at the bodies, then at her. We can't wait anymore. Whoever sent them knows their assassins failed. They'll either run or escalate. Then we move now. Senna, it's the middle of the night. The seal. She grabbed his arm as memory clicked into place. On that letter, I remember where I've seen it. The Chancellor's office. Lord Varek. Kaelin went rigid. Varek was my father's closest friend. He held me when I was born. He swore the oath of loyalty at my coronation. And he's been killing your family for years. The betrayal on Kaelin's face was devastating to witness, but beneath it, she saw something harder crystallizing. Decision. Resolve. Wake Brizel, he said. And the guards I trust. The ones who replaced Marin. We end this tonight. Within the hour, they were moving through darkened corridors, a small force of loyal warriors at their backs. Her pulse pounded against her ribs, but her hand was steady in Kaelin's grip. The Chancellor's quarters waited ahead, and with them, the truth. Lord Varek's door was unlocked. That should have been the first warning. Kaelin pushed it open to find the Chancellor seated calmly by the fire, wine in hand, as if expecting them. Silver-haired and distinguished, with the kind of face that belonged on coins. Your Majesty. Varric didn't rise. I wondered when you'd piece it together. You murdered my parents. Kaelin's voice was ice. I did what was necessary. Varric took a sip of wine. Your father was weak, sentimental. He wanted peace with the Eastern Pax when we should have been conquering them. He would have driven this kingdom into the ground. So you killed him. Killed my mother. Poisoned me. I shaped the future. Varric's eyes flicked to Senna. And I would have succeeded if not for your little truth-teller. Do you know how long I searched for someone with her gift? Years. And she falls into your lap by accident. He laughed softly. The gods have a cruel sense of humor. Senna stepped forward. It wasn't accident. It was fate. Fate. Varric's smile turned cold. There's no such thing. There's only power and those too weak to seize it. He set down his wineglass, and Senna saw his other hand move beneath the table. Kaelin. The crossbow bolt flew. Kaelin shoved her aside, taking the bolt in his shoulder instead of her heart. He staggered but didn't fall, his sword still raised, blood spreading across his shirt. Guards! Varric bellowed. The king has gone mad. He's attacking his own chancellor. Doors burst open, but instead of palace guards, men in unmarked armor flooded the room. Mercenaries. A dozen of them, surrounding Kaelin's small force. Did you think I'd be unprepared? Varric stood now, pulling a sword from behind his chair. I've been planning this for 20 years. Every contingency, every variable. You were supposed to die quietly, Kaelin. A tragic young king, taken by illness. I would have ruled as regent until a suitable heir could be found. My heir. You have no claim to the throne. I have the council in my pocket, half the army on my payroll, and you bleeding on my floor. Varric raised his sword. I have all the claim I need. The mercenaries advanced. Kaelin's guards fought, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Senna's mind raced. She had no weapon, no combat training, nothing but the gift. She grabbed a piece of parchment from Varric's desk, snatched a quill, and wrote with every ounce of emotion she possessed. The truth. Show me the truth. Show everyone the truth. The ink blazed gold, and then the room filled with voices. Not real voices. Echoes. Memories. Every secret Varric had buried, every lie he'd told, every whispered conspiracy suddenly given sound and form. The air itself seemed to shimmer as images flickered like ghosts. Varric pouring poison into the old king's cup, Varric giving orders to kidnappers, Varric laughing as he planned the deaths of everyone who stood in his way. The mercenaries froze, staring at the phantoms of their employers' crimes. What? Varric stumbled backward. What is this? The truth. Senna's voice rang clear despite the agony splitting her skull. The thing you've been running from your entire life. The mercenaries looked at each other. Then, one by one, they lowered their weapons. Our contract didn't include treason, one said flatly. We're not dying for a kingslayer. Varric's face twisted. Cowards. I'll triple your pay. No amount of gold is worth this. The mercenary captain stepped back. He's all yours, Your Majesty. Varric lunged for Senna, a desperate final strike. But Kaelin was faster, even wounded, even bleeding. His sword caught Varric's, twisted, and sent it clattering across the floor. The former chancellor fell to his knees, and for the first time, Senna saw fear in his eyes. You'll stand trial, Kaelin said, his voice ragged with pain and fury. You'll confess before the council and the kingdom, and then you'll hang. You can't prove? Senna held up the parchment, still glowing faintly with golden light. Actually, she said, I can prove everything. Varric's face crumpled. It was over. Kaelin swayed, the crossbow bolt still protruding from his shoulder, and Senna caught him before he could fall. The antidote, she said urgently to Brizel, who had appeared in the doorway. Varric must have one. Search his chambers. Already on it. The older woman's eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't shed. "Hold him steady, girl. Don't you dare let him go." Senna looked down at Kaylin, whose eyes were fighting to stay focused on her face. "Stay with me," she whispered. "You don't get to die now. Not when we just won. Wouldn't dream of it." His voice was barely audible. "Still have to earn that yes." She laughed or sobbed or something in between. "You impossible man. You're impossible man." His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. "If you'll have me. Ask me when you're not bleeding out." "Is that another, maybe?" "It's a survive the night first, you dramatic idiot." He smiled, bloody and beautiful. Then his eyes closed. 3 days. 3 days of fever and fear, of physicians coming and going, of Senna refusing to leave his bedside despite Brazel's increasingly pointed suggestions about rest. The antidote had been found in Varek's private safe, along with enough evidence to damn him 10 times over. The moonshade's effects were slowly reversing, but Kaylin's body had been fighting poison for months. Recovery would take time. Marin's sister had been recovered safely from Crestwood, and the former guard had wept with gratitude when Kaylin, even from his sickbed, granted him exile instead of execution. It was more mercy than most would have shown. Senna wrote to pass the hours, not with her gift. She was too drained for that, but ordinary letters. Messages to Thornwick letting them know she was alive. Notes she'd never send, pouring out feelings she wasn't ready to name. On the third morning, Kaylin's eyes opened. "You look terrible," he rasped. Senna burst into tears. She hadn't cried once through the assassination attempts, the confrontation, and the endless hours of waiting. But his voice, rough and alive and impossible, broke something open inside her. "Don't you ever do that again?" she managed between sobs. "Do what? Save your life?" "Almost die. It's extremely inconvenient." He reached up, his movements slow and careful, and wiped a tear from her cheek. "I'll try to be less dramatic in the future." "You'd better." They stayed like that for a long moment, his hand warm against her face, her tears falling onto his bandaged chest. "Varek?" he asked finally. "In the dungeon. The council has seen the evidence. The trial is a formality." "The mercenaries?" "Disbanded. Your soldiers rounded up most of them." "And you?" Her pulse skipped. "What about me?" Kaylin's thumb traced her cheekbone. "The conspiracy is broken. Varek is finished. I'm going to live." His eyes held hers, that wolf gold gaze soft with something she was afraid to name. "Our agreement was that you'd help me find the traitor, and then you'd be free to go." The words landed like stones in her chest. "Are you asking me to leave?" "I'm reminding you that you can." His voice was steady, but she felt the fear bleeding through the bond. "Your debt is paid. Your cottage is waiting. You have enough gold to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Everything I promised." "That's not what I asked." Kaylin closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were suspiciously bright. "I don't want you to go. But I won't trap you either. You came here as a prisoner of circumstance, not a willing participant. I need to know that if you stay, it's because you choose to. Not because of the bond, not because of obligation, not because you feel you owe me something." Senna took his hand and pressed it over her heart. "Feel that? Your heartbeat. Do you feel what's underneath it?" His breath caught. Through the bond, she let him feel everything. The fear that had become hope, the suspicion that had become trust, the spark that had become an inferno she could no longer contain. "Senna, I'm choosing," she said. "Not because I owe you, not because of the bond, because somewhere between the midnight carriage rides and the objects full of secrets, and you catching me every time I fell, I stopped wanting to go home." She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. "You are my home now, if you'll have me." If I'll... He laughed weakly. I've been trying to earn that yes since the night I showed up at your door. Then stop trying. She smiled through fresh tears. You've earned it. 2 months passed like a dream Senna kept expecting to wake from. Varric hanged at dawn on a cold morning, his crimes read aloud to a kingdom that had believed him a hero. Half the council resigned in disgrace. The other half scrambled to prove their loyalty. Kaelin worked tirelessly, rebuilding trust, rooting out corruption, becoming the king his father should have been. And Senna discovered she was not meant to be invisible after all. Her gift, once a curse to be hidden, became something else entirely. People came to her with cold cases, unsolved mysteries, truths that needed light. She helped reunite kidnapped children with their families, exposed merchants who cheated the poor, gave voice to victims whose stories had been buried. She'd received word that Herrick had tried to claim her cottage despite the paid debt. Kaelin had handled it personally. Herrick now owed the crown 60 gold pieces, plus interest. The cottage itself she'd signed over to a young widow in Thornwick who needed it more. The kingdom began to call her the Truth Seeker. Senna pretended to hate it. She didn't. One evening, she found Kaelin in the library where they'd spent so many afternoons, staring at a book he clearly wasn't reading. You're brooding, she said, settling into the chair beside him. Kings don't brood. We contemplate. You're contemplating very loudly. I can feel it through the bond. He set down the book with a sigh. I've been thinking about what comes next. More council meetings? Another trade negotiation with the Southern Pax? A proposal, actually. Senna's heart stopped. Kaelin turned to face her fully, and she saw nervousness beneath his composure. The Wolf King, uncertain for once. We've been dancing around this for weeks, he said. I've been trying to give you time. But the truth is, I've known what I wanted since the night you kissed me on that balcony. Kaelin, let me finish. He took her hands. I love you. Not because of the bond, not because you saved my life, not because your gift is useful. I love you because you're stubborn and brave, and you call me a dramatic idiot when I deserve it. I love the way you fall asleep with ink on your fingers and the way you defend people who can't defend themselves. I love who you are, Senna Vire. Every stubborn, impossible, beautiful part. Air became impossible. Thought even harder. She could only stare at this man who had stumbled into her life at 3 a.m. and rearranged everything she thought she knew. Marry me, he said. Bond with me. Spend the rest of your life telling me uncomfortable truths and making me a better king. Please. The word came out before she could second-guess it. Yes. Kaelin blinked. That was faster than I expected. Were you hoping I'd make you work for it? A little. I had a whole speech prepared about the strength of our partnership and the political advantages of... She kissed him before he could finish. Yes, she said against his lips. To the marriage, the bond, the uncomfortable truths, to everything. Yes. He pulled her into his lap, kissing her breathless, his hands tangled in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both laughing, she saw tears on his cheeks. I was so scared you'd say no, he admitted. I was so scared I'd never be brave enough to say yes. She wiped his tears with her thumbs. But you made me brave, Kaelin. You made me believe I could be more than a scribe hiding in a forgotten village. You were always more. You just needed someone to see it. From the doorway, Brizelle's voice cut through the moment. Finally! I was about to lock you both in a closet until you sorted yourselves out. They laughed, and Senna leaned into Kaelin's chest, feeling his heartbeat match hers. Everything she'd been afraid of, everything she'd spent her life running from, had led her here, and she wouldn't change a single moment. The bonding ceremony was held under a full moon, the same moon that had once marked her death date, now witnessing her new beginning. Senna wore silver silk that caught the light like water. Kalen wore formal black, the wolf crest at his throat, his gaze never leaving hers. Brizzell stood witness, crying openly despite protests that she didn't do sentiment. When they spoke their vows, Senna felt the bond deepen, strengthen, settle into something permanent. Not a chain, but a bridge. Not a cage, but a home. I choose you, Kalen said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. In truth and in secret, in darkness and in light, for all the days were given. I choose you, Senna answered. The dramatic midnight appearances, the near-death experiences, the terrible jokes you think are funny. They are funny. They're really not. He kissed her, and the gathered crowd erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted until dawn, music and dancing, wine and laughter. Nobles who'd once looked right through her now sought her conversation, eyes bright with curiosity and respect. The truth seeker. The queen who'd saved the king. Later, much later, they slipped away to their chambers, no longer his or hers, but theirs. Kalen loved her slowly, reverently, as if memorizing every inch of her skin. And Senna loved him back with everything she had, finally believing she deserved this happiness. Afterward, they lay tangled in moonlight, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. Tell me something, he murmured. Something I don't know. Senna smiled against his skin. I still have the letter. Which letter? The one that started everything. I asked Brizzell to retrieve it from your study. I've kept it all this time. Kalen was quiet for a moment. Why? Because I want to remember. She propped herself up to look at him. I want to remember the night I accidentally wrote truths I had no business knowing, and instead of destroying me for it, you showed up at my door and asked for help. I want to remember that the most powerful man in the kingdom knocked and waited to be let in. His hand cupped her face. I was terrified that night. So was I. And now? Senna considered. Now I'm grateful. For the accident. For the letter. For you. I spent my whole life hiding, Kalen. Convinced that my gift was a curse. That anyone who discovered it would use me and discard me. You were the first person who saw what I could do and wanted to protect me instead. You're worth protecting. So are you. She kissed him softly. I spent so long running. And then you gave me a reason to stay. Best accidental letter in history. She laughed. Don't get cocky. Too late. They fell into comfortable silence, the bond humming between them, warm and permanent. Senna thought about the cottage in Thornwick, now belonging to someone who needed it more. She thought about the letter that had changed everything, words scrawled in sleepless honesty that had unraveled the conspiracy and delivered her to this moment. She'd spent her life writing other people's truths. Now she was finally living her own. She sent a secret letter by mistake, Senna thought as sleep claimed her. And he showed up at her door at 3 a.m., and somehow, impossibly, that was the beginning of everything. Fair trade. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment below. I love connecting with you. And if this story made you feel something, please like and subscribe. It helps more people find these stories, and it means the world to me.